Okay, welcome to the 6th common session of Sunoikisis Digital Classics Spring 2018. Today we have our first session about treebanking. This is the first session of this semester, and next week we will have our second session about treebanking. And today our guests are Polina Yordanova from the University of Sofia and also the Institute of Classical Studies in London, and Marja Vierros from the University of Helsinki. They are presenting today treebanking, so we'll see how to produce morphosyntactic annotations, and then with Marja we will also see how to annotate papyri and ostraka. So Marja and Polina, welcome to Sunoikisis, and thank you for your contribution. We already had sessions about treebanking last year and the year before, so you can find different class outlines about treebanking. And for today, you have, of course, the class outline in GitHub. I think we can start with Marja, who is the first to talk. Marja, welcome.
Okay, thank you. And welcome everyone also from me. So I will screen share now. Okay, do you see?
Yes, I see. Okay, okay, perfect. I see your slides.
Okay. So welcome to Treebanking 1. The outline of this session today is that I first give a very short and general introduction to treebanks and linguistic annotation, and then Polina Yordanova will demonstrate how to annotate ancient Greek texts in the Arethusa environment. And then lastly, I will demonstrate how we can annotate papyrological material using a Latin example. So why do we talk about trees and tree banks? The tree structure is an easy way to represent hierarchies. So it can be a family tree, like the MacDuck family tree here, or a family tree of different languages, etc. Almost anything, or one sentence in one tree. Like here we have the sentence from Caesar's Gallic War. So there was a bridge in that river. But then today we will see that underlying this kind of graphic tree representation, there is a lot more information within the linguistic tree. So the tree bank then is a term used for a parsed text corpus that annotates syntactic or semantic sentence structure. And we can use the verb treebanking for the activity of building linguistic trees. So treebanking equals linguistic annotation. So adding linguistic information to a text corpus. And there are many types of linguistic information we can add to any text, of course. And usually, well, we can take the word level, for example. So for each word, we can add different types of information. We can add the lemma, so that's the basic dictionary form, or we can add a morphological annotation, especially if a language is morphologically rich, like Greek is, and Latin. So inflectional morphology, or also sometimes in other languages there may be derivational morphology annotated. And then also the part of speech annotation, so the word classes belong to this category. And then we can add an information of the whole sentence. So that's the syntactic annotation. And there we have to follow some sort of linguistic theory. So there are different grammar formalisms behind syntactic annotations. Most importantly in digital linguistic corpora, in treebanks, there are two kinds, dependency or constituent structures followed, and we will very soon see a little bit more about that. And then, of course, also semantic annotation can be added. So, for example, meanings of the words or meanings of phrases and sentences. So, one bibliographical note here, there's a quite recent good textbook on corpus linguistics and linguistically annotated corpora, which is quite clear. So if you want to know a bit more about tree banks in general. So about dependency and constituency structures. This is a very simplified version of this. But basically, dependency grammar presumes that there are direct links between linguistic units. So the finite verb is taken as the center of the clause. So it's the root of the clause, and all other syntactic units depend on this verb directly on or indirectly. So each word has a head on which it depends, except that that main verb is considered as the root. But there can be several coordinated verbs acting as the root. And then the other option is constituency grammar, also called as phrase structure grammar, and it presumes that the words are grouped into different kinds of phrases. So there's noun phrases, verbal phrases, adverbial phrases, etc. And these are hierarchically grouped into larger phrases, and finally clauses. And then for each phrase, one word serves as a head. So there are two different trees here. The left one is the constituency relation tree, and the right one is the dependency relation tree. They are not that dissimilar, but still there is a certain distinction between them. So there are plenty of tree banks for different languages out there, also for historical phases of languages and for several different languages. The first large-scale tree bank was the Penn tree bank for English language. There are several different sections within that. One big one is Wall Street Journal's section. And the Penn tree bank also sort of gives the name for all the subsequent tree banks. But then, as we are classicists, we must always remember that one of the pioneers in this field was Father Roberto Busa, who began to plan a lemmatized corpus of the works of Thomas Aquinas already very early, and this became an early Latin corpus, a linguistically annotated corpus, Index Thomisticus. As for ancient Greek, I recently found this blog post on Biblical Humanities, which is 9 kinds of ancient Greek tree banks. You can go and see the link later on. So there are actually more trees than I said last year, more tree banks, but then many of these are parts of previous tree banks. For example, the Proel corpus of in Oslo, it has some sort of daughter tree banks, and then some of them tree banks that are listed here are also following the constituency grammar, so it might be interesting to take a look. But then the universal dependencies, let's see if we can go and see this. Okay, it's okay, taking some time. We have many different languages annotated within the dependency grammar guidelines. You can also read here the introduction to dependencies and the guidelines that these tree banks follow. So you can see that for ancient Greek, there are 2 tree banks also here. And there we have the Proel corpus I just mentioned, and the original here is the ancient Greek and Latin dependency tree bank that we will talk about just in a moment. So these are modified a little bit so that they fit this universal dependency format, but still they are the same tree banks here. It's easy to use all this data here to compare different languages within the same guidelines. Okay. So the ancient Greek and Latin dependency tree bank is the main thing we are following today. So this project began already in 2006, and there are lots of literature already annotated. So there's both Greek authors and Latin authors, and you can get the data from this address, and you can also find the annotation guidelines there. Yes, so what the annotation contains, which is done according to this HELDT framework in Arethusa. So there will be the tokenization done automatically. So each a token is a word or punctuation mark. Every token is given a number, ID number. You will see that later on. Then there is a lemmatization and morphological parsing, which is semi-automatic in Arethusa. And then the syntactic relations, according to dependency grammar, this has to be done manually. Then there is a semantic layer option also manually. But following the guidelines is very important so that we can actually trust that we can use the annotated data so that it's comparable. So this tree diagram here on the left shows the syntactic tree of this sentence here from Xenophon. So Socrates is guilty of rejecting the gods acknowledged by the state and of bringing strange deities. And the adike, the verb, is guilty, is here the root, and then Socrates is depending on this verb as the subject. So underneath this graphical tree, we have the XML code, which is formed automatically in Arethusa, so you do not need to write this code yourself. But it's good to familiarize yourself what there is, because sometimes you may need to go and adjust some of this information here in the XML, at least when you're dealing with the papyri. So there is the sentence ID, the word ID, which are all done automatically. And the first word here, the adike, you can see that the form is there. The form is what we have in the sentence. Then you have the dictionary form of this verb, adikeo. Then you have the post-tag label, which we see in more detail just in a minute. And then you have the syntactic relation predicate. And the head of this predicate is 0 because this was the root in this sentence. But the following word, Socrates, word number 2, its head is set there to be number 1. So that's the adike there. The word ID number is used here with the dependencies. I have lost my mouse, so I can't actually show you. And then I promised to explain more about the post tag. So it's a machine readable 9-place string for the morphological annotation. So every place has a certain function there. The first position shows the part of speech, the second position the person, the third position the number, and so on. So with the word adike, this V3, SP, etc. tells you that it's a verb in third person, in singular, present, indicative, and active. And the gender, case, and degree, 7th, 8th, and 9th place does not need to be annotated because this is a verb. It doesn't have these, so they can be left blank. And then on the right, you have the noun, polis, city. So then you also only get those labels there which apply to nouns. So it's a noun, singular and feminine and nominative. I have a table here for these letters which are in this string, so that you can actually use and understand and use them in searches, for example. So if you're looking for part of speech participle, then you need to know that there's the T, which means participle. Okay, I'm done now with my introduction part, and now Polina can take over.
Thank you, Marja. Okay, Polina. Polina, you have to unmute yourself.
Okay.
Okay.
Better now. Okay. Thank you, Marja, and thank you, Monica, for your introduction. And now I'm going to share my screen and show you how to actually make a tree bank, make an annotated corpus, so that you can then query it and do all sorts of interesting and exciting things with it. So just a second. There, now I should be screen sharing. And
yes. Yeah, now I see your browser.
Great. So we're going to use the platform Arethusa because it is very user-friendly and very intuitive and very easy and nice to use. So in order to do that, we need to log in. You can follow the address from the class outline. You will be prompted to sign in, and you can use any of the identity providers that are listed here. I won't be logging in from here because I'm already logged in another browser window, but anyways, you can click here and just follow. It's prompting you to do what you need to do. So once you're actually logged in, what you will see is this, or rather not this exactly, because your work field will be empty. I have all the annotations that I've ever worked on listed here for me. But you will see a blank space right here until you fill it in with your own annotations. In order to make a new TREEBANK annotation, you can just click on this green button. And you are taken to this initializing page. There are multiple ways in which you can import your text and use Arethusa's functionalities in order to transform it into XML. As Marja mentioned, we won't be needing to deal too much with the XML, with the underlying XML, because Arethusa hides that from us and only gives us a nice user interface to work with. But anyways, if you know that your text exists somewhere in a repository, for example, in the Perseids repository. I've also provided the link for that page in the class outline. You can navigate, find a text that you would like to practice your newly acquired tree banking skills on, and just pick an author, open the edition. In this case, we just have one edition. Open a chunk of text that you're interested in, and if you scroll down to the bottom of the page and click on the Create Tree Bank link and wait for some seconds, see, it imports the entire text of that chunk that I've chosen here in the input text window. Anyways, we won't be doing that right now because I've prepared some simpler sentences for our demo. When you are starting your exercises, what you can do is just copy the sentences from the class outline. Make sure the numbers aren't copied. Fortunately, in GitHub, that doesn't happen, but whenever you're copying text from any other place, just make sure you get rid of all unwanted punctuation, numbers, and so on. Brackets are also not allowed, of course. And then, oops, lost it, there. And then just paste it in the input text. You can specify the language, and the text direction is automatically selected. At this point, I can just click on the edit button and Arethusa will create the XML for me. But I'd like to show you some more advanced options. I would like to show you the SG, the Smart Grammar tag set. So I need to click on the Click to Toggle Advanced option link and choose the Smart Grammar tag set. The one that is pre-selected, the Asian Language Dependency Tree Bank, works both for Greek and Latin, but for the Smart Grammar tag set to be present, we need to be working with Greek and we need to select it manually. Another thing that you should do before you can create your annotation is to untick this little box, the split enclitics. This is useful in some cases, but for our demo, it will only create lots of trouble. So make sure to untick that. At this point, I can just click on the edit button and wait for it while it does its magic. You could see a second ago the XML being generated. And now I have the 4 sentences that I have pasted in the input box, listed but not tree banked. At this point, you can manipulate your tree bank as much as you want. If you decide that you're done with your work, you can always exit to your workspace, and I will do that in order to access the demo version. You see now the tree bank that I've just created, bears this rather incomprehensible title. You can change the title of your publication, of course, when you click on the link, and there you have change title here as an option. So yes, let's use the Sunoikisis demo version. So there are multiple layers of annotation, as Marja already told you, and there are different annotator styles. Some people prefer to start by building the tree. Other people like to do the morphology first because it's nicer and tidier for the annotator. We will start by doing the morph tab, so the morphology first as a demo, but you can choose whichever style you like more. So first of all, let's look around in Arethusa. Let's see what we have here. We have all these tabs, which represent the different layers of annotation. We have the morphological layer, the syntactical layer, the HG layer, which is the so-called semantical layer. And here, this AT, rather mysterious tab, is responsible for adding artificial nodes. So any ellipsis that is in the sentence and is required so that we can build our tree can be added here. These are quite useful once you've already tree banked your entire corpus to search for various parts of speech, and so on. I'll demonstrate that in the end. These tabs tell you what you've done. So far, nothing. And here you can add comments, for example, questions to words which you weren't certain how to tree bank, or if there was ambiguity, you can justify your choice, and so on. I won't be using the comments history. Well, maybe I can be using the selector later. So I can just untick them here in the settings tab, and they will disappear. This is handy because you see this tree will be tiny because the sentence is quite short, but with bigger sentences, we want to have as much workplace as possible. So let's start by doing the morphology. Marja told you that this is a semi-automatic annotation, meaning that we can choose from a number of choices given. If you are, for example, teaching a class at some point and you would like to use treebanking for your purposes, you can disable the morphological suggestions so that you or your students are prompted to add your own interpretations of the forms. But now we can take advantage of what Morpheus is giving us. As you see, we still need to make a choice. And along with choosing which of the two forms is applicable for my word, I can also add the lemma translation. There are quite complete explanations about the lemma in the guidelines, so you should definitely check them out. So next we go with de. Whoops, we go with de. You see there are some letters flashing here at the bottom of my screen. This is because Arethusa also allows you to use shortcuts. So instead of clicking on every word that you want to work on, you can use shortcuts. In this case, it's W for next words and E for the previous word. As annotator who has worked quite a lot with Arethusa, I'm used to using this option for the shortcuts because there is something that any beginner annotator should have in mind. Whenever a word is flashing in yellow like that, that means it's selected. So if you try to click on another word immediately while this word is still in yellow, you will set a dependency between them. And that's mostly not what you want to do. Of course, you can always undo, so don't panic. So in order to avoid that, you can either, like me, use the shortcuts, or you can permanently place your left index finger on the escape button on your keyboard and keep pressing it after you're done annotating every single word. So for example, I'm done with de now. I press the escape button. I click on de. Well, usually by convention, we don't translate particles such as de. So escape again. Then I click on hysteria. I only have one choice here, so I add my translation. So you can either escape with the escape button or press the enter. That's, I'm told, supposed to work on a Mac. Anyways, on my Windows, the enter doesn't work, so keep pressing escape. Then for Epureu, we have a nice demonstration why our knowledge as people who have some practice with Asian Greek comes handy, and why this cannot be done completely automatically. You see, we have two very different verbs, and although we can clearly see that in this context, it's the first one and not the second one, a computer could not make the distinction because, according to our morphological annotator, both forms are possible. So I will click on Pureu and translate it as March. And then I will go back to my strategy of using the shortcuts because that's way faster. For the again, I have just one choice. Whoops. And then when it comes to the article, again, we have a vast variety. So this part is maybe a bit tedious for someone who is very confident in their knowledge of Greek morphology, but it's excellent for beginners. And it's also very handy when you have larger sentences, because whenever you set the morphological annotation of a word, you see how it changes its color. So all verbs are red by convention in Arethusa, and all nouns are in this dark blue color, this one, greenish blue, I guess, and all the adjectives are blue like that. So it's nice for longer sentences to have an understanding of what parts of speech you have, just with the first glance. So plain, and then we continue annotating. So sometimes Morpheus can give you very strange suggestions, as here, for example, it suggests that Tissafernes could be a noun in plural. Of course, we know this isn't possible. So you should be always careful what you click. Never trust things that are automatic. So we're almost done. My general advice whenever you're tree banking is to hit the save button as often as you remember to, because accidents happen, and sometimes Arethusa kicks you out. So just so you don't lose your progress, the more you save, the more often you save, the better. So now I'm done with the first part, with the morphological annotation, and you see my sentence is now colorful and nice, and I see that I have two verbs. Let's, for the purpose of our demonstration, imagine that the sentence ends here before Kai, and that we only have one verb to deal with, because that would be simpler. In order to start building my tree, I need to choose the head of my sentence. In Dependency Grammar, the head of the entire sentence is the independent verb. So I need to click on Eppure want to and make it depend on the root. So I do this by clicking on the word and then clicking on root with the left button of the mouse. So this is something very important to note, because it's a mistake that many novice annotators make. So you can only have one thing depending on the root, apart from the final punctuation of the sentence. So if our sentence would end here, this could be just Eppure want to, and nothing else can be attached to the root. So everything else in that sentence should be somehow attached under the main verb. So what this sentence says, if we stop it here, is on the following day we can add, they started marching through the plain, through the field. So I can then add this phrase here, on the following day. You can, if you are so inclined, add an artificial token, adding the word chimere, if you really want to be precise. But since this is an expression that can also go without the noun, we won't be doing that now. So I will add hysteraia under Eppure want to, and then I will attach the article under the verb it defines. So they marched on the following day. And they marched where? They marched through the fields, the field. Another convention is that adpositions, so prepositions in our case, such as dia, should be the head of a prepositional phrase, such as dia tu pediu. So we attach dia directly under Eppure want to, and then we attach the noun under dia, and then we attach the article under the noun. So this is a very nice looking little tree, but unfortunately there are many other words that need to be added. And Arethusa tells us exactly how many we haven't used. You can click and see which are the words that you haven't set the dependencies for. Just remember to press the escape button to get rid of the yellow selection. And now if we read the sentence through, we see that there is in fact a second part, and this fairness followed. So in fact, we have two main verbs in our sentence, and they're both independent clauses. So we should somehow make it visible that they do not depend on one another, but are at equal level. They are connected by the conjunction kai, so we can use kai as the coordinator, under which to attach epureuuntu and eipetu. This would mean that I need to put kai as directly depending under the root, and then add both epureuuntu and eipetu under it. So what this tells me and tells the computer once we start querying is that both verbs are with equal status in the sentence, and they're both governing their respective clauses. So it's clear who the subject of eipetu is. And now I only have one unused token. I can either click here or here. You see that this field and this field are interconnected, so it doesn't matter where you click. What this de does, its function, is to basically hook this sentence to a previous sentence. So by convention, we make this the direct dependent of the root, and we put kai under it. So now I've done my morphology, I have built my tree, and I can save to be on the safe side again. So now I can move on to the second layer of annotation, which is the syntactical relation. You can either click on the relation tab, which is here right next to the morph, or you can try some more advanced Arethusa options, which is to right-click on any word. You see how you get a drop-down menu, and you can choose from the given labels. Again, all labels are thoroughly explained in the guidelines, so make sure to check them out before you start treebanking. So again, I can choose which approach to use. I can either right-click or click on relation, and then click on the words and choose which label to assign to my word. So I know that both epureuuntu, remember, escape, and eipetu are independent verbs, and according to the guidelines, they need to have the pred label. But they are coordinated by the conjunction kai, which we will accordingly label as a chord, depending on another chord, which would be de. De in this case is coordinating this sentence and the previous one. But by the rules of the guidelines of treebanking, anything that depends immediately on a coordinator must receive an additional layer. So again, right-clicking or clicking on the word and moving to the right, I need to add this co-label to indicate that those verbs are coordinated by kai. Then I can say that this fairness is the subject of this verb here. This part of the sentence doesn't have a subject, but it has two very lovely adverbial phrases. So this one indicates when they started marching, and this one indicates where. So for such components of the tree that somehow modify the verb, but in an optional way, an optional modification that just adds to the meaning of the verb, we use the ADV label. This can be a bit confusing in the beginning because most people start protesting, seeing that an adjective receives an adverb as a label. But what I'm doing here, in fact, is not saying that hysteria is an adverb. This label here refers to this connection, the connection between the hysteria and the governing verb epureuuntu. So what I'm saying is that the expression te hysteria is serving as an adverbial phrase to epurevunt. So I see that I have two articles, and articles always receive the ATR, so the attributive label. If I want to speed up my annotation, I can hold down the control button on my Windows machine. On a Mac, I think it was Command, but yes, we will see later when you test that, you can tell me. So clicking on the first one and then clicking again on 2, I get them both selected. So we can either choose manually the ATR label for both of them, or again, take advantage of the advanced options of Arethusa, and we can change all selected to have the ATR label. You see they both change. Again, for this sentence, doesn't really save us much time, but for bigger sentences, it's very useful. So dia as in that position always receives the aux p label, reserved for prepositions. And dia pediu can receive the label ADV, since it tells us the direction in which, or rather the path which the army is following. And at this point, we can again save. So now I've set my relations, syntactic relations, and I can move on to the HG label. The Smythe's grammar tag set is very useful for a deeper understanding of the sentence syntax and semantic roles, because it can allow us to more specifically indicate, for example, the usage of a case or of dependent clause. So let's try that out and see what we are given. Articles usually don't get any suggestions because we don't care about annotating them. You see that they morphologically have been annotated as an ADV. In the convention that the guidelines that are linked in the class outline is using, they're supposed to be marked as adverbs and then as particles. So fast forward to the more interesting things, because I see that I'm already advancing in time. For example, hysteria here, we can say that it's a substantive adjective that is in the dative case, or dependent dative case, which is also locative and is for time and is indicating a simultaneous location. And for pediu, we can be more precise and say that this is a genitive that is dependent and for time and place, and is indicating a place, a path, and a rather concrete path. So you see how this menu guides you through your choice. Of course, you always have the none of the above when you believe that you have stumbled upon something that is novel and hasn't been described in the guidelines, or the I don't know, which I personally don't recommend you to use. So the link or rather the gold tree that I've provided in the class outline has all these set. So when you do your own tree bank, you can check your annotation towards the gold standard. So I'm going to move to the second tree, which, as you see, already has the morphology annotated. When you're in the Morph tab, you can choose to pre-select morphology, and it will do this for you. But again, you need to be careful. I will skip this sentence for now in order to move to more interesting things. For example, this tree that is already made, but it has two huge problems. What this sentence says, it's taken from one of Aesop's fables. The mouse is basically telling to the cat that I shall not approach you, even though you have become a sack, because the cat is pretending to be dead. Oh, you. So you see that in our morphology, the only possible selection has been made, stating that Allah is an adverb, which is actually wrong. So we need to create a new form in this case. We can directly type in with the keyboard that we have in the language we have selected. It does the transformation for us. And we can say that this is a conjunction, which indeed it is, and save it. And now it's indicating that I made that change. It's saved in my local storage. So next time I see the word Allah, I will be suggested this option too. Another problem is that the apostrophe is not where it belongs. Again, according to conventions, when we have a word that has been cut in such a way, the apostrophe needs to be treated in the same word element as the word. So in this case, and in any case, when we have typos and we want to change something in our sentence, we can go back, we can exit, and edit our XML. And Arethusa is really, really nice in the sense that it doesn't need you to be thorough in your changes. So, for example, I can just cut and paste the missing apostrophe from here and just get rid of that whole element. And I don't need to go and change the word ID of every word in that sentence. I can just save, and it informs me that the word count for sentence 3 has been changed. And now when I go back to edit my actual sentence, I can see that the apostrophe is now where it belongs. Here the tree, as I said, is made, the morphology has been annotated, and the labels have been assigned. I will quickly go through that so that I clear out any confusion one might have about using the ADV and OBJ labels as indicating what the relation of the whole phrase is to the main verb. We are not saying that gene is an adverb again. What we're saying is that the whole sentence subordinate clause that is introduced by the can conjunction is serving as a sort of adverbial clause to proseleusumai. And if we go and see how the SG of this verb has been annotated, we can see that, in fact, this is a dependent clause, an adverb clause, that is also concessive and is not in indirect discourse. So the sentences that I've shown you are quite short and quite easy, but treebanking can be used for much larger and more exciting texts. And I've just opened this annotation as an example to see how powerful this tool can be. This is taken from the notation of the Greek text in the Rosetta Stone. You see how huge this sentence is. It has, let me see, 159 words in this sentence. And you can't even see the tree. See, we need to zoom in. Oh, I don't remember whether I mentioned you can zoom in and out your tree with your mouse wheel. And you can also change the direction of your tree if you, well, that's the usual visualization of a tree upside down. But for some situations, it's more useful to have a side version of the tree. How do I make this bigger? Okay. See, so it's basically flipped so that you can see a horizontal tree. So basically, that's how you use Arethusa. If you have any doubts where to click and how to use it, you can always use the help right here. It gives you the shortcuts and the color legends and all of that. Always make sure to save your data, and once you're done annotating, you can download your corpus, query it, and do all sorts of nice things with it. And lastly, I just want to show you what to do once you've tree banked your corpus. When you open your sentences, when you're here annotating them, you see that there is a string of 5 numbers at the end of the browser address. So this is the unique number of your annotation. You are going to need to use that when you copy here from the bottom of the program. When you copy this, of course, you can also use the Dolphin tool, which is currently broken, as I found out 5 minutes before this class. So we're going to use the inbuilt comparison tool in Arethusa instead. So you need to copy this address in your browser and substitute the access for, well, for the gold standard, you will use this number here, which is the example sentences. Whoops, not here. Where is it? Oh, it's right here. Right. And here in the reviewable, you can put your own number. So my demo is with this number here. And when you press enter, you see the publication done by Polina Yordanova and Polina Yordanova. And you can see all the differences in the morphology, in the syntax, and also in the, well, I haven't annotated anything here, so yes, I have plenty of differences. And this is how I will finish my lecture. Make sure to read the guidelines before you start translating, and don't be hesitating to play around with Arethusa. It's foolproof. Just make sure you save. Okay, and I will stop sharing now. And Marja, to you.
Thank you very much. And now Marja again.
Okay, thank you very much, Polina. This is always very useful. I learn new things every time. Now I will screen share. So go to the, you see my slides?
Yes, yes, it works.
So a little bit about papyrological material and why we should tree bank them. We mostly now have literary data in tree banks. So the papyrological corpus offers a different type of linguistic source for Greek and Latin than the literary corpora. So we can sort of better study historical development of linguistic forms and variation and change in Greek language. So historical linguistics can also benefit from this kind of material. And the whole existing corpus of documentary papyri is digitally available. You have seen that in the previous sessions. You also know that they are coded there in the Epidoc XML language. And now actually there will be more papyri, as the literary papyri will be in a similar database. This has been just published recently, but there are not, all the texts are not there yet, but that's in the future. But before we can use Arethusa tool for annotating linguistically the papyrological texts, we need to do some pre-processing, because the Leiden markup that you have already learned for the editorial information and in the digital corpus, the TEI Epidoc XML markup is there. So the linguistically annotated corpora are based on the tokenized plain text, and the TEI Epidoc XML is not plain. So there are tags within the text, and as you just saw, you can't just paste text with different kinds of stuff in between in Arethusa. So the Semantia tool was developed by us here in Helsinki for this purpose, for getting rid of the tags, but then also preserving the information that the tags contain. And this has the consequence that the tool creates two parallel layers for each text, or in fact each act of writing, because we divide the text chunks by the change of handwriting, so the hand shift element, because we also want to get down to the different writers of different texts. So there, in the parentheses, there's 3 layers, but there is 1 layer there that's still not functional. But the 2 basic layers are called the original and the standard. The original layer gives you only the forms that are written by the ancient writer, and then nothing more. And then there are dummy markers for the supplied forms, so that the tokenization is identical in both layers. And then the standard layer is presenting the editorial standard. So what the editor has supplied or regularized spellings or expanded abbreviations. So these are visible there in the standard layer. We can also have some dummy markers there, because there are sometimes so difficult gaps that even editors cannot supply them. And for this tool, you can read more about this article that's also linked in the Sunoikisis outline of this class. But I have quickly gathered here in these slides the basic steps for getting the papyri into this annotation phase. And it's also in this how to use address in Semantia. So you first have to sign in there using a Google account, and you will also need to have the Perseids account. And then you can import the document you have selected from papyri.info. And then Semantia creates automatically these layers and divides the document by this hand shift element. And then you can go and see more clearly the document you imported, the different layers, and you then select the layer and then export it to Arethusa. I will show these in a minute, so that's why I'm going so fast. And then you can annotate this in Arethusa, just like Polina just showed. And then you can submit the text there to Semantia board. And then annotate also the other layer. The main part of this is that we have these parallel texts there. So I will now, sorry, are you seeing still my desktop?
Yes, we can see.
Okay.
Yeah. And now we see.
You see the Semantia page first. So you will need to sign in. We are actually quite in the near future changing this so that you will need to sign in only when you are when you want to contribute something, but you can see the data without signing in. But at the moment we are still.
Could you zoom in, please, Marja?
Sorry?
Could you zoom in, make the screen large?
I will in a minute, and in a minute I will.
Thanks.
So yeah, I know it's really small. So this is what Semantia looks like now. Is this better?
Great, yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
So we can first see, for example, one text that has been annotated here. So this was the plus symbol that expands the view. So you can see this has 2 different different handwritings, so that there's one chunk of text written by one hand and another chunk there within this one document. And we also add some metadata concerning the hand and the writer here. So this is done from this wheel. Here you can add information and leave blank those spaces that you don't know anything about. So this is where this information comes from. But clicking from the original or the standard button here, you get to see the text. And you see that there's a transcription here. There is side by side the sort of what's in the papyrus and what's in the papyrus here and what's suggested by the editor to regularize the text. And then we have some abbreviations and so on. These tags here tell what elements in the XML there has been in this document. But this plain text is what we then import or export to Arethusa. And this was the original layer, as you see here. So you have these dummy markers for supplements, SU, and you have dummy markers for abbreviations and so on. But I will show how you can import the text here. So you can click the new button and this window opens up. So you need to know your document URL. So they are the URLs in papyri.info. So let's see, I have selected the text I will show you is the Ostroga Claudianus 1.2, but that has already been imported there. So I will now select the number 3. And this is now Greek. So this is where you get to see the XML of this transcription. And this is where you get the address you want. So I can copy this address and go to Marja and paste it here and press import to Marja. And it will do something. Now it brought it here. So there was also 2 hands. But we are now going to see this Latin ostracon. The standard layer is here. There is not many gaps or anything. This is very complete papyrus. There's only one correction for the K, from the K to C for the standard version. But how do we get this text now to Arethusa? We click this paper plane icon. And since this was, the preset is Greek, but this is now Latin. So we need to change the language and then we press send. And then we need to be, if we're not signed in, like I am not yet signed in Perseids, it asks to sign in here in between. Okay, success. And now we can access the tree bank here. So now I was telling you that it's good to annotate the both layers at the same time. At least I like to do it this way. So I will now open into another window. I have brought earlier this original layer here. So this is now the original layer. We can see the K here, and this is now the standard layer. So with C. So with this text, it doesn't seem to be much point to annotate 2 layers. But in this case, it's very easy because then we can copy in the XML to the other. But I want to show a few features that are typical in papyri in general within this annotation. You already saw Polina's very clear presentation on how to work here. I think I have the pre-select mode already there, so it had already recognized certain words. Is this too small? Actually, again, I will bring it up a bit. Okay. So it doesn't recognize everything. So the names are usually something that Arethusa does not recognize. It's especially in papyri, you have lots of Egyptian names. So with these, you need to always create a new form. But with names, you need to be careful that you are consistent within different texts. So we usually recommend that we use the Trismegistos people database to check the form, the actual form of the name. So I can check Antistius here. Yes, so it there is this type of name. It's actually Greek Antistius, but it exists in this form. So I can now create the new form. The lemma is then Antistius, and then we can select that it's a noun and singular, masculine, and nominative, and save it there. So if we go further, actually Flaccus is also, we need to do the same thing for Flaccus because it's giving adjective. We need to make it a noun. I will skip this now because you already saw how to do that. Kalenius, again, we would need to check Trismegistos if Kalenius is the right form. But in fact, I forgot to say earlier that it's good always to have the edition of the text that you are annotating with you. So I have a scan of this print edition, this text where, Antistius informs Kalenius that there is actually some water in the well. So it's happy news. Here we have comments also on the names. So in fact, this Kalenius is Caninius. So we can add the lemma as Caninius. And then the same part of speech and morphological annotation as previously. Cannot say it. Incomplete form, so it's a noun, singular, masculine, and dative. Right, and again, as Polina said, you have to be careful with this pre-select mode. This is not the verb suo, as it's suggesting. It's the masculine dative of suus. And this is correct. But now you see that our sentence does not have a predicate. So this is where now the artificial token is needed. So the letters, Latin letters, usually are in this form, so we can imagine that there is a verb, either salutem daret or salutem dicit, for example. We don't need to give the verb that we think it is. We could say that this is, see if you have many of them, if you write something there. And then we need to have an insertion point for it. So clicking there, and it's putting it in front of salutem. We can also change that it's behind, but now this add token is available to us. Before we chose the point, it wasn't available. Now we can add a token, and it created this artificial token here. In the XML, this is always at the end of the sentence. It does not, so the place where you put it here does not interfere with your token account. It's always after the punctuation in the XML. So now we can add predicates. I'm using the Mac, so if I use Control and click, then I get this. So this is the predicate. And since time is going quite quickly, well, I can still say that Antistius here is the subject. But in fact, with Latin names, we can see that the Latin guidelines, for example, have a specific section for names. For the Latin names, the prenomen and the nomen all depend on the cognomen. So in fact, Flaccus is our subject. So we change that and put it under dicit, and Antistius is just the attribute of Flaccus. Okay, so we could continue and build the tree, but this I wanted to show the artificial token and creating the new form. And in this sentence, for example, there is a place name again, which is staying black in this pre-select mode. So we would need to create a token for that, a lemma for that. There's a Greek loanword also. So after I'm done with this, I can go to overview and submit it to the Sematia board. Everything that has been brought into Arethusa via Sematia gets automatically the Sematia board here as the option where to send it. In fact, the XML was the part that was also important, so that we can, when we have annotated, we can copy things from the standard to the XML of the original, but then you always have to be careful that you really copy and paste only what is exactly the same. But then you would get two different layers annotated from the same text and then send it back to Sematia. And here you can see that this text has been annotated. It has the green lock and this paper icon, so there is the tree bank already here. So when the board accepts the annotation, then it's automatically brought in back to Seemattie. So here we have the tree bank in the XML form. Then quickly, I want to show the tools. So we have a very simple way of querying here. We can actually export these layers also. We can do searches for these documents, the dates and text types and writers. But if you want to compare original and standard layers, for example, or search certain lemmas or certain words or certain syntactic structures, you can do it here. So these search fields work with regular expressions. You will learn about them in the later sessions, I have understood. But here, for example, you remembered maybe that in the post tag, the third place was the number. So if you want to see if there is something in the singular in the original, but the editor has wanted to say that there is some, it should be in the plural, you can do this kind of search here. I'm not sure if there is anything. No, there is. So we have 9 cases of these. So this, we don't have yet very much annotated data there, but on what we have there, you can do these kinds of searches. So there's, for example, the verb in singular, but this might also be a phonological problem as well as this one. So this is what you can actually do then with the data after you have annotated it. And I don't think I have anything more now to say.
Okay, Marja, thank you very much, and also Polina. So, do you have questions in the audience? No questions? Well, of course, Gabby, maybe you have a question. I don't know.
Oh, I was just going to say I'm delighted to see the tools in Seemattie. That's an innovation since last year, I think. So that's very cool, and I think it's this is something that's going to be very useful to people to immediately see what they can do with the information that they've tree banked. And it seems to me that this is a much easier interface to use than probably the interfaces that we've seen in the past as tools for searching and querying tree banks. So I'll be interested to see how next week, when we talk about querying tree banks, how all of these things are brought together and how we may be comparing usability and functionality. Obviously, there's a trade-off in those always. Then, so I was very pleased to see that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's but that's a very simple way to query things. So what we have seen in the previous years, there's much more complex queries that you can do, but you can of course also do these simple things too. But this is a basic thing.
Well, yes, but this is already a lot, and I agree with Gabby. So there are many new things. So Marja, thank you very much, because I'm happy to see that. And definitely next week, Doug will teach us how to use regular expressions in Proyas, so we can really see how to query text. But I think that for Seemattie, the important thing is that you are working on papyrological text, and so we have new data, and definitely we need this data, especially, as you said, for proper names, because we miss them. Perseids is based on Morpheus, which originally was built on dictionaries, where, of course, as we know, we miss proper names. In this sense, papyri and ostraka are really very, very important. But there is a lot of work that we have to do, in the sense that we have to annotate all these things, adding new forms. But this is definitely important. And another thing, I want to thank also Polina for mentioning the Rosetta Stone, also because Polina is the person who annotated the text, the Greek text of the Rosetta Stone. So in general, and we have a project in Leipzig on this. So Polina, thank you again. And another thing about Perseids, so at the beginning you mentioned that you showed us identifiers, and you said, oh, here we have something. Well, I don't remember if you said incomprehensible. I don't want to talk about that, but in Perseids you can see these identifiers. Sometimes, or many times, you see the name of the author or the text. Other times you have an identifier. There is a specific architecture for those identifiers. We mention them sometimes during our Sunoikisis sessions, and they are built according to the site and the CTS architecture. But in general, if you have problems in identifying those identifiers, you can search the Perseids catalog, so you will get the corresponding author name or text title, work title for each identifier. So this is just a parenthesis. Other questions were a bit late, but this session was very, very interesting. So, and Anise in the chat, thank you, Anise. And Anise is an expert of linguistic annotation. And so next semester, we will have Anise talking about that. But yes, it was great. I'm happy to see all these things. And also, I'm very happy to see different tools talking with each other. Perseids, Arethusa, and now Sematia. So, yeah.
I have a question actually, which is for everybody, and Monica, you also may have ideas about this, which is that obviously in a module like this, where we're introducing many different topics, and we talk about tree banking for 1 week or 2 weeks, or even a couple of years ago we talked about it for 3 weeks. Students barely scratch the surface. They study it. They spend a few hours learning how to do it. It's quite a steep learning curve. And then they move on to something else. If someone wanted to really get into doing tree banking much more,
Gabby, we have problems with your audio.
Oh,
the noise. So maybe try again.
So I was. Can you hear me better now? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was just asking if students wanted to learn more about tree banking and get more in-depth experience than they get from the brief introductions we give in Sunoikisis. What other opportunities are there? Are there workshops? Are there schools where they could spend more time focusing on this sort of thing? What suggestions do people have?
That's a good question. I don't think I've heard of any. I think just if in the universities there are people who are interested in it, they can organize courses, but that's dependent on that people know that. I think workshops internationally would be one option, but then they are always, students can't travel that much, and I don't know.
Yeah,
we taught short workshops in London for language teachers last year, which Polly came and taught for us. But that's sort of one-off, one-day workshop, but which I think is about the right sort of size, right? Because if they're really into it, they can pick that up. Does the Leipzig summer school have touch on tree banking at all?
Not this year. We had something in the past during the Digital Humanities Summer School in Leipzig. We will have something again at the Tufts University this summer because we have an EH Institute, and we had a few workshops in the past, but definitely we should think of organizing something more regular. Yes, this is an idea, like epidoc workshops to gather people and annotating together. So hackathon for tree banking, for producing data, to learn how to annotate. And yeah, this is an idea, yes.
Internship would be another nice idea, I guess. If someone could raise the money to spend, a month in Helsinki working with Marja, that would that would be useful for everyone, right? I mean, they'd learn a lot, and you know.
Yeah. No, yes, we have a community here. Sunoikisis Digital Classics is a community, so we have people. We just need to organize this, and then yes, to get funds. But definitely, this is in the agenda for sure. Yeah. Okay, so now is 6:25, at least in well, Germany. So I think now is a bit late. I would like to go on, but I think we have to stop here also because our guests are 1 hour later. So I think they want to go home and have dinner. So thank you very much for this excellent session. It was very, very interesting with new things. It's not true that you said the same things of last year, but many new things. I'm very excited about that. And next week, again, we have our second session about treebanking with Francesco Mambrini and Doug Haug, and we will see Proyel, and definitely we will go on with regular expression. So thank you all. Have a good night and see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.